Hello out there, and welcome to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I am Caleb, and I'm joined by Alan today. And it is recruiting season. We are in the midst of quite a fun time for South Carolina fans. So there's already been 3 recruits over the past week. It is 2:38 p.m. Eastern right now, and I'm not going to give everything away, but I think within an hour and a half or so, you might see another commitment. So far they've all been, pretty essential pieces here, right? So far you had 4-star, basically 5-star Cam Pringle, who's an offensive lineman, in-state offensive lineman, could have gone anywhere in the country, went to South Carolina. And I say basically 5-star because he's the second highest rated O lineman in the 2024 class. And if you don't know how Rivals rankings work, the first rankings, when they first come out, you have like 10 or so 5-stars, and then that balloons up to 50 or so by the end of the process. And that's really just to give the rankings folks time to kind of digest camps and digest senior seasons and all that sort of thing before they get their final list together. So it won't surprise me at all if he ends up with his 5th star before it's all said and done. Let's see, who else you had this week? You had 2023 wide receiver Elijah Caldwell. That was yesterday. That's an in-state guy, Northwestern. He had a really strong senior season. He originally was committed to West Virginia, but Justin Stepp and Shane Beamer and the entire offensive staff did a really good job of just making a really strong late push there. And that paid off yesterday. Visited his school several times over the course of the last several weeks. Had him on campus for an official visit. I believe it was the same weekend as the junior day last weekend. And yeah, that late push paid off. And you really had a position of need, right? We talked about the wide receiver room a good bit last week when we were talking about the offensive depth chart, which we're going to get to the defensive depth chart for 2023 here later in this episode. But you do look pretty good for this year, but you have a lot of guys that are going to move on next year, either to the NFL or for graduation and stuff. And you got to start rebuilding that room. And yeah, Caldwell could be a part of that. Who was the other 2024 guy this week? My brain is escaping me. It's been a weird week. We were supposed to do the podcast yesterday, and literally the second we logged on, my power went out for like 4 hours. So that was
a little foreboding. I'm not gonna lie, it felt like a bad sign of some stuff, but yeah.
So give me 2 seconds to pull this up. But while I'm pulling this up, the other big question recruiting wise that everyone has on their mind right now is, of course, what's going to happen with Nicholas Harbor. He is the remaining 5-star 2023, pretty much the last 2023 target, other than some transfer names that are still out there and may crop up later in the spring. So some good news and some bad news on the Nicholas Harbor front. Good news is that Shane Beamer got the very last in-home visit with Harbor this past week. He saw pretty much all of his top 5 schools. So Michigan, Oregon, Maryland, Miami, South Carolina, all got in-home visits. And the very last one was Shane Beamer on Wednesday night. Bad news is he's that official visit that we've talked about to Oregon that's gotten moved around a couple times scheduling wise. He's on that right now. So Oregon will get the last word before he makes his decision on the 1st, which is, was that
Wednesday.
Tuesday? Wednesday next week. And we've talked about throughout the process that they have quite a lot to offer. I have seen so many people kind of speculate on what could happen here. And the reason that you see so many different takes there is the Harbors, the family, has done a really good job of kind of keeping these things close to the vest. And so, yeah, if anyone says that they know for sure where he's going, I think that they're lying. That's just me. But I do think that there's still some positive signs for South Carolina at the moment, right? Like you get that last in-home visit. Beamer was the first to offer him all the way back when he was at Oklahoma. So it's the longest relationship that he's had. Seen some really good things from the family and from Harbor himself anytime South Carolina has come up. But it really just depends on like what is the most important thing to him. I know that he has found Michigan attractive in a lot of ways. I know Maryland's the home state school, and his family would love him to be close by. It's like 10 minutes away from where his family lives. And then, of course, Oregon has the whole Nike angle and the track angle and all those sorts of things. South Carolina's track program is not too bad, by the way. It's one of the top, 20 or so in the country, maybe top 15. But Oregon, of course, is on a whole another level. It's the birthplace of Nike. So it's going to be really interesting down the stretch. My future cast right now is still in for South Carolina. If anything changes in the coming days, I will change that, and I'll let the Insiders Forum know on GamecocksScoop.com.
What's your streak at right now? What's your future cast streak at?
Man, it's really good at the moment, honestly. I've hit several in a row, so that would be a little bit of a bummer. I'm actually tied for the top in the Rivals network right now with an 88% accuracy rate. So yeah, I hit Pringle, I hit Caldwell, I hit Michael Smith. There's another one that you might see here soon. I hit Elijah Davis. So just thinking about the people that have come.
Now, are any of the people you're tied with at that 88% covering recruiting at our websites for Michigan, Oregon, Maryland, or Miami?
No, they're not.
Ooh,
So most of the people I'm tied with are national folks. So
there you go.
We will see. But again, when I put that in was in the summer, and if you had asked me then where he was leaning, South Carolina would have been my answer. But I mean, if you're going to get the number one athlete in the class, if you're going to get this like generational type guy, you're going to have to go up against everyone's best punch.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there'll be any shame, I guess, if South Carolina loses out. Like, it's been a really, really good battle, especially for Beamer's just here in his second year. Haven't shown a ton on the field yet. I mean, obviously this year shows some encouraging signs. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you're even in it with days left with this guy is definitely encouraging, and we'll see how it plays out over the coming days. I'm not even sure that Harbor himself knows what he's doing yet. I know that they're gonna, after he gets back from the visit, gonna talk with the family and try to figure all that out. By the way, the one other recruit from this week that I was blanking on a minute ago was 4-star tight end Michael Smith. That's another coup, I think, by Beamer and his staff for this class. And that puts South Carolina at number 11 in the early team rankings for Rivals. I actually think they'll probably pop up in the top 10 later today. And yeah, I mean, that's a very strong start to this 2024 class, which is one that if you've been paying attention on Gamecocks.com for any length of time, I've been targeting since I took over last year as, maybe the breakthrough class for this, because they've actually had the time to build those relationships over time. And they've shown a propensity for being really good at evaluating talent when they're young, being one of the first to offer, building that relationship, and then they blow up. But by the time they blow up and all these other bigger schools come into offer, South Carolina has already kind of built the inroads there. And we're really seeing that with this class, maybe more than even last year, even though we did see that some last year. So very exciting time in recruiting. Check out GamecockScoop.com for any updates on that. I'll have a weekly recruiting wrap up tomorrow. And one of the big things I'm going to focus on, for those of you that maybe have kind of checked out since the end of football season, is what the 2024 hot board sort of looks like, and what South Carolina's early chances are with several of those folks. I mean, obviously they're already starting to collect, but I'm going to try to give you like a positional breakdown of the top targets at each position. So that'll be coming tomorrow on GamecockScoop.com. All right, let's talk a little football, and then we can talk some basketball and end with a little baseball, because you went to the opening like the preseason press
Media day
conference for that
yesterday.
Yeah. So football wise, last week we talked a lot about the offensive depth chart and what we think that's going to look like. You can go back and check that out in last week's episode. I recommend it. I thought there was some good discussion about some key positions that there's still some question marks, I guess, heading into 2023. I think defensively, we probably have even more uncertainty and question marks, especially at a couple of key positions. So where do you want to start? You want to start D-line?
Yeah, work front to back. That's kind of the way we did it last week.
Okay. So yeah, obviously the biggest question mark, I think, on the entire team at the moment heading into 2023 is what is going to happen at edge. So you lose Jordan Birch and Gilbert Edmond in the portal, who were the presumed starters. I mean, they were the starters for most of this year after Jordan Strahan went down. We are still waiting to hear about Jordan Strahan's medical request or whatever to turn another year of eligibility.
Waiver, for a seventh year after,
Everything I've heard is that the South Carolina staff feels pretty good about that, but obviously that's kind of up to the NCAA at this point. But let's operate with the assumption that he gets that back. He's probably going to be one of your starters at edge as long as he comes back fully healthy, which our latest update with him was that he kind of is progressing nicely there. What do you think is going to happen beyond that?
Yeah, I don't want to use the word like scary, but I do think it's also a position where, as I think everybody saw last season, this is a position where depth matters a lot, and it's where the teams that don't have depth kind of get exposed. You're just looking for jumps kind of from these guys that were from these last two recruiting classes, right? You're looking for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who played some snaps in the bowl game. He's going to be playing a lot more. Hey, got a comment. Thanks. Appreciate that. I didn't catch your name there, but appreciate that. Anybody's got questions on anything we're talking about here, feel free to leave a comment. So you're looking at a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. I think Tyreek Johnson's a guy who played a lot, not a lot, but more than some of the other underclassmen did last season. You're probably counting on him to take a bigger jump this year. And we know they've been working the portal. They've been trying to get another defensive end. We know at least one fell through last week. I think the staff understands this is the biggest question. Shane Beamer said point blank last week when he spoke at halftime of the men's basketball game. Someone asked him about edge, and he said, yeah, it's a concern. We're not deep enough there right now, or something along those lines. And I think that's kind of one of the things you're watching in the spring. A, those young guys, how they develop, but B, kind of what the plan is there. And I also think it puts a hyper focus on your interior pressure too. With now you're down, we're going to talk about that in a second, but you're down Zach Pickens, and you're going to need something. You're going to need even more up the middle this year without as much certainty at edge.
Yeah, I talked about the possibility that maybe Tonka Hemingway, who played some at edge in the bowl game and later in the season, ends up popping out. You try to develop some of those interior guys, which a lot of those interior guys did show some flashes this year. You're thinking, TJ Sanders and Boogie Huntley, MJ Webb. So yeah, I mean, and then Hemingway himself. I mean, the question I almost wonder is like, do you change your scheme because right now you're pretty dependent on two strong edges. If you go to more of a 3-5 or something,
I don't think you're changing your scheme in the offseason with well, I don't want to say it worked. I guess it worked well. It depends on your definition of well, but definitely didn't fail last year at least. Like you had some talent on defense. You were able to, with the exception of a few games, you were able to stay in games for the most part. I also more wonder about freshmen who might be able to contribute immediately. I know there's a size gap, there's a weight gap, there's a development required, but I don't know. Desmond Umeozulu, is that a guy who you think could play immediately?
Yeah, so I've talked about him a little bit. I think he's probably, of the two, him and Montague Rames, probably the more college ready of the two, although I think both will develop into very good edge guys over the course of their career. Umeozulu actually just had a 168 person jump in the final Rivals 250, and that's a lot to do with the way that he showed out at the Under Armour game. Both in the practices leading up to it and in the game itself. I think he had a forced fumble and a sack in the game. And yeah, so I mean, I do think that he's going to be relied on pretty much immediately, and they're going to have to. But I mean, in an ideal scenario, you're not starting him on every down, but just because of size issues that you talked about, like it's going to take a second to get fully up to speed. The other good thing is both Umeozulu and Rames are early enrollees, so they are going to go through the spring, get used to the system, go through winter workouts, summer workouts, all that sort of thing, and have some time to bulk up. But still, I mean, they're 18 years old. It's gonna be tough. In an ideal scenario, in the past, you'd use both those guys in like obvious passing down situations, use their athleticism, but not necessarily want to force them to hold the edge against the run game. So
that was a big problem last year too, as long as we talked about the edge, center the edge, especially those outside runs, those quarterback keepers on the zone reads, just things like that were a big issue for this defense.
Definitely. So I think you still are going to hope that a name emerges in the portal, perhaps in the spring. You're going to hope that Terrell Dawkins maybe can stay healthy, which he has not been able to do since his freshman year. He actually had an excellent freshman year. I think he broke the NC State single season sack record for freshmen or something his freshman year, but obviously since then he's been plagued by injuries.
You don't know what you have there. He barely played all last year.
Right. So that would be helpful. I think you're probably going to have to look at sliding Tonka out at least for, first and second down to hold that edge. And yeah, I mean, we'll keep you updated on transfer things. Unfortunately, edge is one of the toughest positions to find in the transfer portal. It's like edge and O-line are two of the most difficult positions to find in the portal. You also have to think about like a Jerron Willis, who came in as more of an outside linebacker transfer from Auburn. He was a 4-star guy heading into Auburn and redshirted this past year. Can he bulk up a little bit and help out at edge, maybe at least in passing downs and rushing the quarterback? Maybe. But yeah, it does sound like it's going to be a little bit sketchy and a little bit of a piecemeal approach. What about on the interior? Who do you project as the starters there?
I think Boogie and Webb if Tonka's playing on the outside, Boogie and Tonka if Tonka's playing on the inside, obviously. But I think all three of those guys are going to have to play significant snaps. You're soaking up a lot of what you're going to lose with Zach Pickens there. It's an NFL defensive tackle. You don't just replace guys like that. So I think that's going to have to be another, committee effort, I guess I'll call it, with all three of those guys. But if you're technically starting, I think probably Boogie for sure. And then depending on where Tonka plays, he'd be kind of have that inside track.
Yeah, I think you'd love to be able to start Tonka there. It just, you might have to slide him out. And then, of course, you have Xavier McLeod coming in as a 4-star interior guy. But again, it's going to take a minute to beef up enough to deal with SEC offensive lines. So you might see him a little bit. But I would think, some of those older guys that have been in the strength and conditioning program for several years now. TJ Sanders, I think, will definitely play a big role there.
Yeah, he was on the 2 deep in the whole game, too. Didn't even mention him. But yeah.
All right, let's look at linebackers. So completely flipping that room, Brad Johnson and Sherrod Green, who were both 6th year.
12 years of college football exiting your linebacker room this offseason.
Yeah, which we talked a little bit throughout the season that maybe they weren't the most physically gifted. I mean, Sherrod Green I thought he had a really, really great season and was a solid contributor for a long time. But I think the injuries over the course of his career probably slowed him down a little bit in a way that, he wouldn't be if he didn't have those injuries. So anyway, I think it's possible you're going to be more athletic, but I don't know that you're going to have that same leadership quality, obviously, with 12 years worth of college experience going down. So who do you project right now, very early on in January to start at linebacker?
Am I wrong for thinking the linebacker room is maybe, I don't want to say the easiest, but simple to piece together here? You're playing a 4-2-5, so you've got 2 spots, and you've got, I think, kind of a clear-cut top 4. I think your two are going to be a hopefully healthy Mo Kaba coming off his ACL tear and Debo Williams, your experience. I think those next 2, you're going to slide right in. Stone Blanton, who played a decent bit last year, and especially late in the season. And from everything we're hearing, Shane Beamer loves him. He's talked about him pretty much since day one. Pup Howard. He seems like one of the guys in this recruiting class incoming that can play immediately. He's early enrolled, not just early enrolled for the spring, but was on the bowl practices. He's going to be, 9 months within the program by the time next season rolls around. I think your top 4 is kind of set there. It's just a matter of how much you're rotating. Kaba coming off an injury, how much you want Pup to play immediately. Stone Blanton looked a lot better stopping the run than he did in obvious passing downs last year. How does that kind of play into things? Does he take a jump on those passing coverage situations? I think it's more mixing situations, but the bodies are going to stay the same as long as they stay healthy.
Totally. And I do think Willis will probably factor in there as well. Like I said, he was a blue chip guy out of high school. He just was behind some veteran depth at Auburn. But, I think Mokaba actually was off to a really good start last season, and I'm excited to see what he can do when he's healthy. Debo Williams, I think, is a great leader, very tenacious and, gives his full effort on every play, but he sometimes has physical limitations. So I could see him definitely, he's going to get a ton of snaps there, but I don't know if he'll be the every down starter or if it's more of a rotation at that spot. But I think if Mokaba is healthy, he's probably an every down starter. At the other.
I think he would have been this year if he had stayed healthy.
Right. And then in the DB room, again, a lot of turnover there, right? You have Cam Smith, who's probably going to be a first round draft pick. And then you have
Darius Rush,
who is also going to get drafted. You have the departure of Devontae Reed, who, got a lot of snaps, especially early in the season at safety. So yeah, how are you kind of seeing that DB room shake out?
I think you kind of got a preview of it in the bowl game. It's crowded is kind of the way I would stack that up. I think you're going to see DQ Smith and Nicky Manwari at safety. I would kind of put that, not locks, but those were two freshmen who both played really well last year. I'd kind of pencil those two in at safety. Obviously, Marcellus Dials, your number 1 cornerback left. He's really your only experienced cornerback left. And then those other 2 spots at corner and nickel, I guess. You're kind of mixing things a little bit. We saw Keenan Nelson Jr. in the bowl game. We saw Emery Floyd in the bowl game. O'Donnell Fortune, the guy who probably played more than either of those 2 in the regular season. And then again in the bowl game, some combination of those 3. A name I haven't heard a lot of people talking about because he got hurt in the middle of last year is David Spalding. He played some nickel last year. I expect him to be back in the mix as a rotational piece. He wasn't really starting last year at nickel. You had Cam Smith there. But I do think David Spalding's a guy who could help you if he's healthy. And I don't know, Peyton Williams, we saw him come in against Tennessee after Eamon Warrior's targeting and played pretty well and basically a crash course. It's a really deep room. It's another one of those, I kind of use the term puzzle pieces for linebacker. There's a lot of bodies there I think the staff likes. I don't really know how that's going to shake out just in terms of the snap count distribution. But I think Smith, Eamon Worry, and Dial are going to be on the field almost every snap they're healthy.
Yeah, bringing in a class of 5 DBs that can kind of play corner, safety. Most of them are, could project either way depending on how the program wants to use them. If I had to guess, in January again, who of those guys are the most likely to contribute early, it'd be probably Jalen Kilgore at number 1 and Zabari Sandy at number 2. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of youth and a lot of talent in that DB room. I think within 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a problem like in the quarterback room that we talked about last week, where you have so much talent that could work out. Probably going to see some people transfer out just because it's so stacked in there. But yeah, I think that's one of the harder ones to project at the moment, just because there's so much young talent that needs to kind of play things out on the field. I think your obvious starters are Marcellus Dial, Nick Emenwari, and DQ Smith, like you said. And then what plays out at those other 2 at the corner and the nickel will be interesting. And you could see DQ Smith play some nickel, which he did some last year.
He did last year, yeah. And then what does that do for David Spalding if you want to kind of throw that there? Is he playing corner? Is he kind of moving around? I mean, I think people forget he played every single snap of that Kentucky game, which the injuries they had, because Devontae Reed missed that game. Yeah, I would say this is the deepest room on the roster, honestly.
They've definitely done a good job of reloading that room, which was Ironically, throughout the Muschamp era, even though he is a former safety that had developed a lot of NFL safeties, was one of the weakest rooms throughout that entire era. And I think they've done a great job of flipping that room. And I think you're going to be good there. You just might have to go through some growing pains.
Yeah, I don't think you really worry about that just because I think how could you not, of all the assistant coaches and the staff to have faith in, I think you have a lot of faith in Torian Gray right now after what you saw last year, after the way those freshmen came in. I mean, Nicky Manwari literally drive one of the season as a true freshman came in there and made a big play. That's coaching, that's development. That's, like I said, of all the places in this roster where you're sleeping well at night, other than maybe quarterback, obviously with Rattler back, I think your secondary is probably where you're feeling the best.
Yeah, definitely can't disagree with that. Anything else on this defensive side? Do you want to talk any special teams?
I was looking at it before we started, but it's like Kroger's back, Jeter's back. You're going to need a new punt returner with Josh Van gone, but that should be AB.
I actually think, and this is something I forgot to mention, but you had one other transfer commit this past week, which was the Memphis wide receiver Eddie Lewis. And he led Memphis receptions this past year, but he also led them in punt return yards. I think he was like all AAC returner, either first or second team. So I think he kind of projects to take over the Josh Van role, both in the wide receiver room and in the punt room. But I mean, yeah, we could see Amarian Brown and who knows at kick returner, maybe some more.
Xavier gets back. There's no reason to kind of go away from that. I think he's a pretty good kick returner. He took one back last year.
Right. Definitely. So, I think special teams are pretty well laid out. South Carolina did just pick up a preferred walk-on from a kicker. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head right
Argent, now. I think that's how you say it.
Yep. He's out of Hoover, Alabama. And if you look at the kicking recruiting services, which Rivals doesn't really do much with the kickers, but if you look at the other kicking recruiting services, he's rated pretty highly. I think like the number 7 or 8 kicker in the country in this class. So there's your heir apparent to Kai Kroger,
Mitch Jeter,
or Mitch Jeter. I mean, he's a punter or a kicker. I don't know which Limbo has planned for him at the moment, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good look at the two deep on both sides of the ball between these 2 weeks as we stand in January. But then obviously we got some more information coming here in the spring. We got some more transfer portal action going to happen after spring practice, both departures and arrivals, I think. So a lot still to shake out. And just a general overview, if we're looking at offense and defense, I mean, I think edge, like we said, is probably the most discouraging or scary at the moment. Any other like positions just that you're thinking of off the top of your head that you're like, I'm kind of worried going into
I'm questioning the running back situation still, just because you lost Lloyd, you're losing CBS, you lost Bell. We talked about it all last week. You can go back and look at our last episode, but you're counting on question marks there, right? You're counting on Juju McDowell taking a jump. You're counting on Mario Anderson taking an opposing talent jump from D2 football to the SEC. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm saying I think that's probably where my question is on offense. And then there's kind of the overabundance of tackles, not enough interior offensive lineman thing we talked about last week, and the inevitable game of musical chairs is going to have to happen there.
Yeah, and I guess one more note on that is speculating on center last week. I'm hearing more and more positives about Nick Gargiulio, and it wouldn't surprise me if he starts there or gets some snaps there, depending on how everything shakes out. So I know we were kind of like debating like 5 different names last week at center, but
so actually an update on that, Shane Beamer addressed, which we haven't done since we last recorded, when he talked to the men's basketball halftime last week. He said that he expects Hank Manos, Wyatt Campbell, and Chad Terrell to be moving on. They're not involved in their workouts right now. So that's obviously 2 offensive linemen and a tight end. Terrell didn't play last year with his ACL tear. Manos was on the 2 deep most of the year, but didn't play much other than special teams. And Wyatt Campbell, I think, was only on the 2 deep in the bowl game. But if none of those figure back, then yeah, you're going to need someone who hasn't played center at this level. And it does seem like, Nick Gargiulio is leader in the clubhouse. You want to call it that at this point on January 27th?
Yeah, I mean, and Yale grad, was the captain at Yale, and I don't know if you guys understand how the Yale captainship works, but you get one per year, and he was the captain for the whole team. So that's, I mean, leadership standpoint, mental standpoint, I think he can definitely do it. We'll just have to see if physically he can stack up to the SEC. All right, let's real quick talk basketball. It's been kind of an off week for basketball, but you've been busy working on some fun stuff. And then, of course, we did have a men's game on Wednesday that went like a lot of the men's games. Always, actually, I guess it followed a little bit of a different script, but ended with the same result. So I'll talk about the game real quick, and then I want you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been working on behind this with the managers and with Lamont Paris and all that sort of stuff. But the game versus Florida, it ended up 81-60. But it was a game that South Carolina was really in for the whole first half. There was a moment right after halftime. Gigi Jackson made a tough shot to bring it within 6, and then the wheels completely fell off right after that. And Florida went on like a 16-4 run, and then ultimately ballooned the lead all the way up to 30 before, garbage time happened and South Carolina's backups, kind of closed the gap a little bit. What did you watch some of that game? What were some of your?
I watched all of it. Yeah. I was hanging out in the live thread, which we do for every men's and women's basketball game on GamecocksScoop.com. If you want to hang out, you have thoughts. If you're trying to find a positive, I think Gigi Jackson stacked another good game on top of his one against Auburn. That's 2 in a row where he's played well. He's looked confident in his shot. He had a double-double in this game, along with Josh Gray, who had his first career double-double, actually.
Best game of his career for sure.
Yeah.
If you're looking for positives, yeah.
I'm curious if he's going to start tomorrow at Georgia. I know Lamont actually addressed that on his Carolina calls last night. He talked about Gray a little bit. I think the negative, it kind of goes back to what we talked about after the A&M game, which is that, or maybe it was the Ole Miss game. This team has 3 clear-cut scorers, and any game where any of the 3 are not firing, you're pretty much toast. I don't want to do the Hayden Brown foul reset again. We've done that so many times on here, but he fouled out with 12 minutes to go in the game on Wednesday.
I'll say, was that his earliest foul out of the year so far? I think it was.
It has to. I mean, he's at 69 fouls this year now. He's fouled out, I think, 6 times. I don't know what else to do with it. I don't want to have that conversation again. It kind of is what it is at this point. But if he's not scoring, you're probably not winning. And obviously, if he's on the bench, he's not scoring.
Well, him and Michi were both off on Wednesday.
Yeah, you're going to need a better version of both of them. Coming into a Bulldog back-to-back here at Georgia on Saturday, and then hosting Mississippi State on, I think it's Tuesday. And Mississippi State's 1-6, 1-7 in the league right now. So maybe that's a game that will have a chance, at least on paper, back at home.
Yeah, and again, I mean, at this point, you're just looking for growth, and I don't know at this. I mean, obviously, you stole that win in Lexington. Still, I mean, I guess that's completely on Michi just going insane that night, which is going to happen from time to time. But really, down the stretch, you're just going to need to see better every getting blown out in these games. You can't keep falling behind by 10 and spiraling and letting it get to 30. It seems like in a lot of these SEC games, once things start to go south, there's no counterpunch. And I don't know if that's like a mental thing, if that's just like they're getting out talented and those stretches show it stronger than others. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Gigi Jackson's fun to watch. Definitely keep going out and supporting the team because that's really fun. And also, yeah, remember that Lamont Paris is like completely rebuilding from scratch. There's pretty much no one left on this team from last year outside of Josh Gray, who, like I said, he showed some encouraging signs the other night. I thought it was a lot more aggressive, both offensively and defensively. And he needs to play like, I mean, he's a huge guy. He's usually the biggest guy on the floor.
7 feet tall, yeah.
He's usually the biggest guy on the floor. And the other night he actually looked like he recognized that and played like that. And if he can keep doing that, that's going to be pretty key going forward. And then Chico Carter Jr. has developed is another returner that's developed into a very solid role player as a 3-point shooter. I don't know. At one point, he was leading the SEC in 3-point percentage. I don't know if he still is or not. But you got to get more talent in here. I mean, and it's not going to turn around to you. So
it's my only other note on that. And it kind of goes to both the things you're saying there is you saw in that game in the middle of the second half, you saw Zachary Davis get ejected. He swings an elbow. It was stupid. It was on a rebound attempt. You got to have more body control than that. But I think I'll call it a positive is that you saw the team kind of fall apart after he went out, which means Zachary Davis is playing well. We've both kind of liked his game. We've liked his potential. He's flashed some things on offense. But the negative of that is, of course, a player gets I mean, you saw, I think the stat I saw was Florida had 2 offensive rebounds the first 28 minutes of the game. Then they had 3 in 2 possessions after Zachary Davis got tossed. Like the heads dropped pretty quickly there. That's a very concerning sign as you're just trying to talk about that effort. You're talking about that compete level. Something goes wrong and the heads drop that quickly. That's not a good sign for anybody involved.
Yeah, the key to that one, because it was kind of an interesting stat line. I wrote about it right after the game if you want to go back and read it. But South Carolina out-rebounded Florida and had more free throw opportunities than Florida and still lost by 21, which isn't something that you typically see. But a lot of that was due to Florida was shooting very efficiently. I think they shot 47% and Florida had like 21 more points than in the fast break because of turnovers.
Yeah.
So South Carolina's got to clean up those turnovers, especially on the SEC, or you're just not giving you. I mean, you spotted them 21 points basically, and that was
the 21-point game. Yeah.
The women's team kind of took a week off.
Yep.
Which came at a nice time there for them because they have a fun stretch coming up. They go to Alabama on Sunday, 16-5 Alabama. I mean, decent.
Sneaky good. Yeah, they're 5th in the SEC now.
And then, of course, in the coming weeks in February on the 5th, you travel to UConn, which, of course, is this premier matchup. And then LSU comes to South Carolina.
That's the one. The only two undefeated teams in the country right now, South Carolina and LSU. So it's fitting that matchup's going to be on Super Bowl Sunday, and that does feel like a Super Bowl kind of for the regular season, that South Carolina LSU game. And I'm expecting College Game Day to be here for that. ESPN announced they're doing 2 more Women's Game Day in person, and it's already been announced as a sellout 3 weeks out, or I guess 2.5 weeks out now. So that's the one you're circling, that LSU. Not to toss UConn aside, it's a game at Alabama Sunday, whatever. That LSU game on February 12th is what everyone's looking at right now. Can't wait. And you just look into, I don't want to throw the U word out yet with 9 games left in the regular season, but that's kind of your big hurdle between getting there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. So that's all I really had on the women right now. Obviously it's a bye week. The other basketball note, I guess, or basketball adjacent note, the University
Colonial Life Arena thing.
Yeah. They released a statement saying that some poll, I can't remember who put it out, ranked Colonial Life Arena in the top 100 arenas in the country, in the world. That's the incredible home environment that they create for the women's basketball games, and also, as a concert venue or whatever. But that was kind of cool, I thought, if you're a South Carolina fan. All right, tell us a little bit about some of the off-kilter articles that you've written for Gamecocks Scoop lately. I believe they're both free. So those of you that, normally check us out and then aren't ready to join premium or whatever yet, although you definitely should, because there's a lot more behind that paywall. But yeah, I think they're both free. One on the managers and one kind of talking to a lot of people from Lamont Paris's past.
Yeah. So 3 weeks ago now, the night before South Carolina played Tennessee men's basketball, it was at Colonial Life Arena at 9 p.m. on a Friday with one other writer. We were watching manager basketball, which if you don't know what that is the student managers at a lot of college basketball programs. They'll play each other in games, usually the night before the actual teams play each other. So like that night, it was South Carolina's managers playing Tennessee's managers. This was not just like mess around, pick up basketball. This was a full court game with a shot clock, 40 minutes in the arena, keeping score, It was really fun to watch. I talked to some of the managers who played, and they wrote all about that. There's a whole world to student manager basketball that y'all probably don't know about that I would encourage you to read.
And South Carolina student manager basketball, I think, is on a three-game
winning streak.
Right
Yeah, it started that night because they can't get games together. Every game's, some schools don't travel with enough managers. Some of them just don't get back. Like I know they didn't play Auburn's managers, but they did play A&M's, Tennessee's, and Florida's. I don't know if they have a game tonight against Georgia's. They'll be in Athens tomorrow. And then today, it's funny, that next day, Lamont Paris, again, after the Tennessee game, started talking about his past, his football career. He made a comment about how much he loves basketball, how he used to play football, but he still thinks basketball is the best sport. And I was like, all right, I got to know more about this. So I called a bunch of Lamont Paris' high school coaches, people who knew him back then. I talked to him on the phone. I think it was 4 people I talked to total. And I wrote about it. I wrote about Lamont Paris as a high school kid in the 80s in a small town in Ohio. And I would definitely encourage you to go read that on the website today. It should still be on the front page.
Yeah. So, and then the only other note, and we got to get out of here pretty soon because there's some stuff potentially happening on GamecocksGroup.com here in about 40 minutes that I got to get prepared for. So yeah, maybe go check out GamecocksGroup.com at 4 p.m. if you're watching this live. But anyway, the baseball team had a media day for their preseason stuff yesterday. What were some of your takeaways there? I know we talked a little bit of baseball last week, and our main point was that we expect the pitching as long as it stays healthy, which was something. I mean, they had some really, really bad injury luck in that pitching staff last season, but as long as they stay healthy, it should be a very solid top tier SEC pitching staff.
Yeah, if you are a premium subscriber to GameCocks Coop, I talked to, kind of in gaggle format yesterday, Will Sanders, Noah Hall, and Jack Mahoney, who should be your 3 in the weekend rotation at least to start the year. I wrote about the pitching a little bit. It's on the website now if you are a premium subscriber. And that's kind of the whole thing, right? It's Mark Kingston kind of to the point where he's literally knocking on wood while he's talking about pitchers staying healthy. It was just that kind of year last year. That's what he was doing yesterday. But he mentioned 6 guys he thinks could be starting pitchers. The 3 I just mentioned, Matthew Becker, Hicks, I'm blanking his first name right now. I feel bad. I think it's James. James Hicks. And then Eli Jerzenbeck, who's this freshman we keep hearing about. We talked about him last week. And Will Sanders, Noah Hall said he's the best freshman pitcher in the country. Will Sanders says he's never seen an 18-year-old do the stuff he can do. I'm kind of getting Nicky Manwuri vibes. Remember last August, we were just sitting here over and over hearing every coach talk about this freshman safety who none of us had seen play. That's kind of the vibe I get off Jerzenbeck, and I don't know how he's going to fit in that mix. He said he could start games. You said last week you wanted him in the bullpen in that closer role. That's kind of probably the thing I'm most excited for this baseball season is to see where this guy he's almost like a mythical figure at this point, right? He's never pitched in a game, but everyone keeps talking about how great he's going to be, and you're just kind of ready to see him actually on a mound.
Yeah, so you're both going to have to keep all those pitchers healthy, and you have to improve your batting, which was one of the lowest in the SEC last year. You're hoping that bringing in Monte Lee helps with that. Did you get a chance to talk with him yesterday too, or that was
Monte Lee was not there yesterday? Okay. We had Braylon Wimmer kind of representing the position player group. That's one of the few coming back this year, but it's that transfer class you're really counting on to fix the offense. You've got Will McGillis coming in from Southern. See if I can do this. Will McGillis, Dylan Brewer from Clemson, Jonathan French from Clemson, Caleb Denny from Oral Roberts, Gavin Cassis from Vanderbilt, Jacob Compton from Memphis. I think there's one more position player I'm blanking on right now. But
ones that I could think of, but I think you're right. There's one that we're not thinking of.
They had 7 position players, but it's a loaded. They basically flipped the whole position player group, the whole batting group over in the offseason, just trying to fix what was really what held this team back last year. And that's more of it goes back to that puzzle piece thing I talked about, right? Like how are these guys going to fit? Who's playing where? You've got 4 different guys who played catcher in the fall baseball who all could be your opening day catcher. Kingston, I asked him about that yesterday. It's a very wait and see right now for the baseball team, but I do definitely get the sense like everyone knows last year can't happen again. I mean, I think it was Jack Mahoney used the word foreign. He said last year was just foreign for this program. It just doesn't happen here. And he talked about it as a bit of a sense of everybody knows there's urgency here. It's got to happen this year. I don't know what that means once games start, but it's going to be interesting to unfold, and I'll be covering it on Gamecock Scoop.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'm also pretty excited about is to see if Michael Braswell can kind of break through the freshman ceiling that he hit last season, because he came out of the gates really strong. It was almost like didn't know
It was
yet.
supposed to be difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And then like a lot of freshmen do, that step up to catch up to him. He struggled a little bit down the stretch, but I think he's a very talented guy. I think he's a guy that has a shot to play in the major leagues at some point. And so yeah, I'd like to see him kind of break through that glass ceiling that kind of got put on his head a little bit down the stretch, and get some of that confidence and swagger back, because when he was balling in the first part of the season, it was really fun to watch him as well. So I think if you're a South Carolina fan, there's some cautious optimism here.
That's a very good way to put it. I think
yeah. I also think you could see this thing spiral very quickly if things went south, because there's already so much. I mean, Kingston's on the hot seat. Like, let's call it like it is. And so if you were to start out the SEC schedule with a few losses, you know, two or three series right out the gate or something, then things could get bad quick too.
Yeah, we're gonna probably talk about this at some point closer to when it happens. I think it is imperative for the team to get off to a good start. The SEC schedule kind of breaks better for you early. You've got, you know, the Vanderbilts, the LSUs, the Floridas are kind of more April. You got Arkansas in May. You're not, those on paper highly ranked teams aren't coming at least the first few weekends of SEC play. I think you got to get off to a good start, A, for that reason, and B, for the general vibes of this team, this program, this fan base. You scheduled really soft and non-conference. You got to clean up on those, which that's something Will Sanders actually mentioned yesterday. They weren't good enough on midweeks, which you brought up last week. And that was acknowledged yesterday by people there. Not that he's going to be throwing the midweeks, but someone's going to have to, and they're going to have to be better at those. I think a good start is very, very important for this team and just the general trajectory of how this could go. Because I agree with you that it could spiral quickly.
Yeah. So we'll definitely have some more baseball coverage as we get a little bit closer to the season. Obviously, like we said, got some big women's basketball games coming up in the next couple of weeks that we'll have some full preview, in-game and post-game coverage for. I'm going to continue to write about recruiting. We're going to continue to talk off-season football stuff as we gear up towards spring practice. And, you know, the men's team is still, like, I really enjoy watching them every time, because Gigi Jackson's going to have one or two jaw-dropping plays. Michi Johnson, if he gets hot, is like really, really fun to watch. And then, yeah, like you said, the other freshmen, kind of seeing how they come along. So really good time to join GamecockScoop.com as a subscriber. So definitely go over and check that out. It's only $10 a month or $100 for a year, which is less than $10 a month. So go do that. Get all the premium access to those articles and those tidbits and the Insiders Forum, which has gotten a lot more active lately. And yeah, we'll see you on the podcast again next week. Until next time, this has been Kalen with the GamecockScoop.com podcast.